Maailman ruokaturvaa uhkaa muun muassa konfliktit ja ilmastonmuutos. Mitä satonsa menettävät maanviljelijät voivat tehdä, jos sateet eivät tule ajallaan tai kuivuus tuhoaa viljan? Tässä jaksossa tutustumme siihen, kuinka ilmastonmuutokseen voi sopeutua tai voidaanko sitä jopa ehkäistä.
Climate change has had a serious impact on agriculture in Eastern Africa. Climate change and food security are intricately linked, in my opinion. And climate change is adversely affecting how farmers can produce food. The way that we notice climate change is that the rainfall patterns in Eastern Africa have changed drastically. The total amount of rain is approximately the same throughout the year, but just the severity of the rainfall is much more intense. Then there's periods of droughts, and when the rainy season starts and ends is completely unpredictable. And this unpredictability of the rainfall patterns has made it very difficult for farmers to be able to adapt to these changes and to be able to grow enough food to feed themselves, their families, and their countries. We are trying to work with farmers to help them to adapt to the challenges they're facing with climate change. We're trying to change the techniques that they're using for farming. We're using conservation agriculture. We're using green manure cover crops, minimum tillage, and these principles associated with those to try to maximize the use of the rainfall that they get to grow as much crops as possible. And also increasing the soil fertility, the soil infiltration rates, that they're able to make use of the rainfall that they get on their field and not lose a lot of it to surface runoff and where it's not benefiting anyone. This way, this climate smart agriculture is enabling them to adapt in the best possible way to the challenges that they're facing. FIDA is working with a variety of different local partners in Tanzania. We're working with the local churches. They are very instrumental in bringing about messages for advocating for different things. They have a large audience that are readily listening to what they're saying. If the churches can be involved in advocating for a specific issue, we can much more effectively mainstream that issue and gain a larger, or more people will hear that message and more likely respond to that as well. We work with different NGOs trying to build knowledge, network, capacity in international NGOs as well as local NGOs. We want to try to build as much capacity in local actors within Tanzania that will be able to influence the society from within the country, influence ideology, mindsets and attitudes to try to help bring about change from within. And this change is much more sustainable than if somebody from outside tries to bring about and convince people they need to change the way they're doing agriculture or whatever else. So how can we really empower the local actors, the local decision makers, and the local people within the country to be the agents of positive change where they are and bring about sustainable transformation and change to their communities? We have found that getting people to adopt new farming practices, getting people to change their behavior has been a slow process and quite a challenging one often. And this stems from what we have come to find out is this fundamental worldview or their belief system. These things that are beneath the ground, these underlying factors that you don't immediately see or recognize as somebody coming from outside. We've noticed that their worldview or what they want to avoid doing is creating disharmony within their communities and within their families. If they create disharmony, they feel that their ancestors are going to come and punish them for this disharmony. And that is the worst thing that they can do because they'll get the wrath of their ancestors coming to put a curse on them or coming to cause problems for them now. And of course, in agriculture, if a farmer starts to adopt new farming practices in their community, starts to use conservation agriculture, starts to use green manure cover crops, and then that year the rains don't come for some reason due to climate change, the rest of the farmers in that community are going to blame that one farmer. You did something differently than the rest of us, you created disharmony, and now our forefathers are cursing us because you've done something differently. And this is a very a very big incentive not to change what they're doing, to continue with the old ways of doing, to please their ancestors. And this is a real challenge we have to address if we're going to bring about change in these communities, to look at the root causes, why things are not changing, why things are staying the same, and try to address them specifically through our actions and bring them up on the table and discuss them. And that way we can much more effectively bring about positive change in communities that we're working in. So when we look at how to improve food security, there's a bunch of different factors we have to consider. A lot of very practical things that need to be in place, I think, for us to be able to achieve food security in these countries. Firstly is the mindset, the motivation of farmers, and also the position of farmers in society. When you talk with rural farmers in Tanzania, you notice that a lot of them feel like they are the lowest of the low in society. They are on the lowest rung of the ladder, as you would say, and they feel like they don't have value, and the young people in rural areas will do anything so that they don't have to be farmers, that they will go to cities to look for any kinds of other professions, but that's the last thing they want to do. And I think this is one of the fundamental things we have to change. We have to be able to bring hope to farmers so that they can feel like they can earn a decent living by farming, to be able to produce enough income to support their families, send their children to school, buy clothes, buy luxury items that they need. And this is the fundamental first step. They are by far the largest sector in society. Out of the entire workforce of Tanzania, 68% of them are farmers. Out of these farmers, 83% of them are smallholder farmers. And these smallholder farmers produce over 75% of the food in the entire country. So they're a very important sector, and yet they feel like they're valued the least. So how can we make sure that we give them the value they deserve, and that they can feel like they can really be successful as farmers and citizens within their countries? And I think the fundamental way to do this is to be able to have them produce enough food from their farms, be able to adapt to the challenges of climate change effectively, so that they feel like this is still a viable livelihood for them, and they'll continue farming, producing more, generating income, even generating some savings and access to capital. And I think this is a fundamental thing for us to be able to start the process of achieving food security. Another big question in Tanzania regarding food security is also the larger structure of access to land. Who can use land? How is it available? And how much access do women have to land? And how much say do they have in how much that land is used? It's still a very patriarchal society. Men usually get to have the final say in very many things, including what's done in the fields, even though women are the farmers that actually farm the fields. So if the woman wants to buy inputs for the farm, she has to get approval from her husband to be able to buy those inputs. And sometimes the husband wants to use the money for something else. And how can we balance these structures in society that women are more in a position to decide and able to freely use and manage the land in the best way that they see is possible? Also in Tanzania, there's quite a few people that are renting land. They don't own their own land. And when you find that people are renting land, they're not willing to invest into the long-term productivity of that land. They'll take the short-term, what they can get, use unsustainable farming practices, degrade the soil further, and this is completely against what we're trying to promote, is long-term sustainable agriculture. And this is much easier if the farmer owns their land. They're much more willing to invest into that land, the soil fertility in that land, and the long-term productivity of that land. And that's really the only way to achieve food security, is to increase soil fertility and the productivity of the land that they're currently farming. Another way for us to adapt, to help farmers adapt to climate change, is also to change the crops that they're planting. In Tanzania, they love to plant maize. Maize is their fundamental food crop, and they like to grow that more than anything else, and they like to eat that more than anything else. But the problem is with climate change, the changing of the rainfall seasons, often you'll get the maize to mature to shoulder height, and then it'll wither and wilt on the field and they won't get any food whatsoever because the rainy season stops short that year. And all too often you see farms that have unripe maize that have not produced anything for their farm, for their families. And this is something that we need to address. Can they plant sorghum, millet, cassava, other drought-resistant varieties that will enable them to get some harvest even if the rains are not as good as they could be? And diversifying what they plant in their fields can be an effective way to also increase food security. And these are usually very nutritious indigenous crops that they can grow, and they can also get a lot of nutrition out of them, even more nutrition than planting maize. So how can we diversify the production and what they're growing in their fields to adapt to climate change more effectively and increase food security? When we encourage farmers to diversify what they're planting in their field, they have to have access to seeds and be able to plant these new varieties that we're promoting. And access to certified seeds is critically important. There's nothing more frustrating for a farmer than to plant their field, take care to plant it well, to not have their seeds germinate when the rain starts. So they put all this effort and they've somehow wasted effort for them. And it's absolutely critical that they have access to good quality seeds that are going to germinate and be able to produce food for the fields or for the farmers. And that's one thing that also needs to be in place, I think, for food security to be achieved.
Sain mahdollisuuden eduskunnan naisverkoston kanssa tutustua Fidan työhön Tansaniassa tammikuun matkalla. Ja minun teki erityisen suurin vaikutuksen vierailu, koulutus ja koe maatilalla, jossa pienviljelijät ja nuoret ottivat meitä vastaan. Oli ihanaa nähdä, miten heistä huokui tällainen innokkuus ja ylpeys tästä heidän työstään, ja he esittelivät omia palstojaan ja siitä, miten he istuttavat uusia taimia ihan siemenestä alkaen ja olivat ylpeitä yleensä siitä, mitä he siellä tekivät. Ja oli hienoa nähdä myöskin, miten uusia lajikkeita kestäviä lajikkeita yritettiin siellä kasvattaa. Ja saimme myöskin maistaa tällaista kassavaa, jossa on syaniidia, se vähän pelotti, mutta oli mielenkiintoista myöskin kuulla, miten he ovat jotenkin tottuneet siihen myrkkyyn ja syövät sitä tietysti sitä kasvia keitettynä. Sitten myöskin oli kokeilu siitä, kasvihuonekokeilu, missä oli muistaakseni istutettu tomaatteja. Ja valitettavasti nämä tomaatit oli saanut joku taudin ja koko sato oli mennyt pieleen, ja nyt oli vähän vaikea luoda uutta uskoa siihen, että myöskin tällainen kasvihuoneviljely on kannattavaa. Ja saamme myöskin kuulla, että afrikkalaisilla on kunnia-asia, että nämä viljelyt ja viljelymaat ovat siistejä, ja he ovat sen takia haravoineet pois kaiken irtonaisen maan ja lehdet, jotka ovat pudonneet maahan, ja tämähän ei ole niin kuin lannoituksen kannalta fiksua. Eli nyt on opastettu siihen, että nämä lehdet ja ruohon ja muu jätetään sinne näiden taimien juurelle, niin kasvaa huomattavasti paremmin. Eli kaikki tämä oli todella hienoa nähdä, ja he myöskin, että he ottivat sen itsellensä ja pystyvät muuttamaan myöskin tapoja, miten on viljelty satoja vuosia, ja nyt ovat uudet tavat käytössä. Sitten kuulimme myöskin siitä, miten tämä ilmastonmuutos on aika rankasti vaikuttanut Afrikkaan. Että se, mitä on aikaisemmin ollut ihan selkeä, että nyt on kuivakausi ja sitten on sadekausi, niin nyt oli vähän sekaisin. Tammikuussa olisi pitänyt olla kuivakausi, mutta silloin sato. Ja he harmittelevat sitä, että jotkut kasvit kestävät kuivuutta ja toiset taas sadetta paremmin. Ja nyt olisi hyvin voinut istuttaa sellaisia kasveja, mitä kasvaa sadekaudella. Eli tämä kaikki niin kun on sellaista, mitä on meidän kaikkien vastuulla. Ja on todella hienoa, että me tuetaan tätä työtä. Ja mun mielestä tämä on parasta kehitysapua, että me tuemme ihmisiä kehitysmaissa auttamaan itsensä. Eli tästä olen todella kiitollinen, että saan olla mukana todistamassa tätä hienoa työtä. Yleensä kun puhutaan ilmastonmuutoksesta, niin ollaan huolissaan siitä, että merivesi tulee nousemaan tai mitä kaikkea muuta se aiheuttaa, mutta harvoin ajatellaan sitä, tai varmasti ei tarpeeksi ainakaan sitä, että miten se vaikuttaa niin kuin ruoan saatavuuteen ja miten kuivuuskaudet ja sadekaudet vaikuttavat siihen, että meillä yleensä on ruoka. Ja tämä kaikkein eniten tietysti kohdistuu sitten köyhiin maihin ja kehitysmaihin, missä muutenkin on huonosti tilanne ja miten voidaan kasvattaa kasveja, jotka sitten niin kuin eivät silloin pärjää, kun on kuivaa tai sadetta. Vierailuni tällä koe- ja koulutusmaatilalla vahvisti sitä mun huolta, että maailman ruokaturva on vaarassa ilmastonmuutoksen takia.
One very critical thing that we're working together with farmers is how to improve their farming techniques, their farming methodology to be able to increase their food production. We're training mainly in conservation agriculture, the use of green manure cover crops. We found that this is a very effective way for farmers to increase their soil fertility, as well as to increase the infiltration rates of rainfall into the soil, for the crops to be able to maximize the little rainfall that they get some years due to climate change. And this is a very simple technique. It is just to cover the soil. In conservation agriculture, you cover the soil with dead leaves, with grasses, something they can find to bring to their fields. That additional cover to the soil eventually breaks down and also increases the humus, the organic matter in the soil, and this equates to increased soil fertility. We find that finding material that they bring from off the field is very difficult for them to find enough to farm a larger piece of land. So through some research with our partners, we found these crops that are called green manure cover crops. And why they're called green manure cover crops is that the crops, when they're planted in the field, they're also nitrogen fixing. They increase the nitrogen level in the soil, equates directly to soil fertility, and as well they provide a living cover onto the fields. So instead of having to bring the cover from somewhere else, they grow it directly in the field. And this cover then brings all of the benefits of covering the soil. It prevents evaporation from happening when the hot African sun beats down on the soil. It doesn't remove the moisture from the soil, and yet it restores the soil structure as well through using minimum tillage, that the soil is able to store a lot more water as well when it comes into the field. And when the water sinks deeper into the soil, then the crops can use it for much longer. Even if they get a severe short amount of rain, then the rain doesn't run off into the next farmer's field or into the rivers, and the plants in the field are able to make the most of this rainfall, and this way produce more food, even in years when there's drought or poor rains due to climate change. Food storage is also a big challenge in Eastern Africa, and the techniques they use to store food are not very effective. Statistics show that post-harvest loss in Eastern Africa can be from 20 to 40%, depending on the food variety. Cereals, about 20% are lost on average. Fruits and vegetables, over 40% can be lost. And if we're able to improve how they store their food, or how they can add value to their produce after it's harvested, to increase the shelf life of it, this is a very effective way that we can also use to increase food security, just by preventing food from spoiling. Another very important aspect to food security is enabling farmers to have access to markets. Quite often farmers are in rural areas and they're away from the markets, or even away from large roads or the transportation network they could use to bring their food to the market. Very, very common is that a middleman will come with their truck to their field and they'll offer to buy whatever they want to sell. But the middleman will dictate the price to them. And the price, of course, will be significantly below market value. So the farmer who's producing the food, making the effort to grow the food, do not get the benefit they should from their hard work, because the middleman comes with a very low price and they're not able to have any other choice. It's his price or they don't sell it at all. And we found that smallholder farmers, they want to sell about 35% of their harvest to be able to have money for other things as well. So enabling them to have access to a market where they can get a fair price is essentially important. And some of the techniques we're using is helping them to form groups. When they form a group, a lot of farmers together increase the volume that they're selling. This way they can even hire a truck to come and take all of their food at once to the markets and get a better price. So usually when you work together in a coalition, you're able to have more bargaining power as well when it comes to the middlemen and the transporters of the food. And this is one way that we're trying to utilize to enable that farmers get a better price, better income, and get more money for the hard work that they're doing. Within the work that FIDA is doing, women play a very vital role, and I think they are the key to also bringing about sustainable development in Eastern Africa. When you help a woman, you help the whole family, and that's really the goal of our work, is to make sure that the women, the children, get the benefit that they deserve from the work that we're doing. They're a key part of our work, and I think they're a key way that we're able to help the whole society to develop, to make sure that they're developing in their knowledge and their skills. And the ways that we're trying to work directly with women is, of course, to provide them with training in farming techniques, as well as the understanding of how they can produce more food using these simple techniques we explained around conservation agriculture and green manure cover crops. But also we want to mobilize them into groups and also into these saving groups that are called table banking groups. And these are very simple way for farmers to save money and to get access to capital. Traditionally, only about 6% of farmers in Tanzania can get access to capital, access to loans, which is very low. And a very big limiting factor is, where do I get money to buy inputs into my farm? Where do I get money for school fees? I have a small business idea. Where do I get money to start that small business? So this access to capital is a very crucial thing that we're trying to also address. And we want to do this in a sustainable way. We don't want to have somebody from the outside come and give them money, but how can they start saving their own money, their own resources, and using those resources then to develop themselves and to start those businesses, to buy those inputs in their farm, and empower them in this process as well. And I think this aspect of empowering and having the person feel like they have achieved something with their own resources is a critical step in also achieving this sustainable development. And they can hold their heads up high that I've done something on my own 2 feet using my own hands, and their mindset, their attitude, their personality, also their self-esteem has improved remarkably when they're able to achieve this. And these saving groups, how it works is that they come together. There might be a group of about 15, 20 women. They come, they bring a small amount of money each week that they want to save, and then you're able to apply for loans from that group with some interest. So if you have a business idea, you present it to the group that I want to start selling vegetables in the market, and I need this and this amount of money. You can take that loan if the group approves it, and then you return that loan with some interest back to the group. So the capital that the group has is growing all the time. Every week they're saving more and more money, and then people that have taken loans are coming back with interest to increase the capital they have in the group. And we've noticed that some groups that have been functioning for longer, they have hundreds of euros, they have thousands of euros, some even have tens of thousands of euros saved over the years of their own money through the simple method of saving little by little, taking small loans and gradually bigger loans as you continue to save. And this is really bringing about sustainable change and development in communities financially, as well as in their own self-esteem and their own sense of accomplishment and their value as citizens in society. As we've started to introduce green manure cover crops in Eastern Africa and looking at experience also from South America, we've noticed that there's great potential also to use these to mitigate the effects of climate change. And as an almost free byproduct is that green manure cover crops can can sequester carbon in the soil, can sequester carbon in farmland and store it in the soil. And this is a very interesting development that we've been able to now shift from only helping farmers adapt to climate change, but also now they can be involved in the struggle to mitigate climate change as well. And our initial studies have shown that it's possible to sequester about 4 tons of carbon in about 1 hectare of farmland per year, after they've been using green manure cover crops for several years. 3 or 4 years have started to build up the soil fertility, the organic matter in the soil. And this is a way that the farmers can also be involved in the challenge or in the fight against climate change as well. Of course, Africa, I think, disproportionately is affected by climate change. They're responsible for a very small percentage of the greenhouse gas emissions. I think the latest figures I've seen, they only emit about 4% of all greenhouse gases globally, and yet the consequences of climate change are much more severely felt in Eastern Africa. So is this really justice? Is it fair? And sometimes I've felt like it's very unfair that the Western nations that are predominantly responsible for global warming, greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, are much less severely affected by climate change than countries that had very little to do with the reason why we're experiencing climate change as we are. So I think this is a climate justice question as well, that how can we improve climate justice and make sure that they are less affected by climate change, and climate change that they were not involved in creating in the first place. So the work that FIDA is doing in Tanzania is very much linked to Tanzania's own goals and priorities. We want to make sure that our activities are very much aligned with theirs. And our work is designed to help them to achieve their own goals. We want to play a supporting role in helping them to achieve what they want to achieve with agriculture, with women's empowerment, and all of these other factors that our work is related to. And we also want to advocate that the government, the local governments, would also take on board these climate-smart agricultural initiatives, that they be part of their own strategies, their own priorities that they have in the agriculture sector. And this way, when they're promoting it themselves, you can really bring about long-term sustainable change in these communities.